Ambassador Chen sat in the council chamber and tried not to smile. The alien delegates around him talked about humans like they were children. The tall Zephyrians with their blue skin looked down at him. The small Krithai with their 4 arms clicked their fingers in what he knew was laughter. All of them thought humans were weak. For 50 years, humans had played this game perfectly. They came to the galaxy as farmers and traders. They built small ships that looked harmless. They asked for help and protection from the big alien empires. The Galactic Council gave humans a tiny corner of space and told them to grow food for everyone else. Chen had been the human ambassador for 10 years. He was very good at looking grateful and humble. When the Zephyrians demanded more food from human colonies, he bowed and said thank you. When the Krithai wanted to put monitoring stations in human space, he acted happy for their protection. When the council made new rules that only applied to humans, he smiled and signed the papers. But Chen knew things the aliens did not know. Far away from the trade routes, hidden in dark space where no one ever looked, humanity had built something else. They called it the Predator Fleet. These were not the small cargo ships that visited alien worlds. These were warships designed by humans who remembered what their species had been before they reached the stars. The council thought they understood humans. They had tested human technology when they first arrived. The little patrol ships humans showed them were slow and weak. Their weapons were basic. Their shields were simple. The aliens decided humans were a Class 7 species, smart enough to be useful but too weak to be dangerous. What they did not know was that humans had studied every alien species for decades. They knew how Zephyrian shields worked. They understood Krithai battle tactics. They had mapped every major fleet movement and every important supply line. While the aliens thought humans were learning how to farm better, humans were actually learning how to hunt them. Today was another inspection day. The council sent teams every few years to make sure humans were following the technology agreements. They would check the shipyards on Mars and the defense stations around Earth. They would count weapons and measure shield strength. Then they would write a report saying humans were harmless and needed protection. The inspection team was led by Commander Veltar, a Zephyrian with silver markings that showed his high rank. He had cold yellow eyes and a way of speaking that made it clear he thought humans were stupid. Behind him walked Dr. Yixim from the Science Guild, taking notes on a floating tablet. 3 security guards followed them, all carrying weapons that could destroy a human city. Chen walked with them through the Earth Defense Station. The station looked exactly like what the aliens expected. Old technology, basic weapons, and crew members who seemed nervous around their alien visitors. The humans showed them the missile storage areas and the shield generators. Everything was smaller and weaker than alien military standards. Commander Veltar looked at the human weapons with disgust. These missiles could barely scratch the hull of a Zephyrian cruiser. The energy shields would fail after one hit from a real warship. The humans had sensors that were decades behind alien technology. How had such a weak species even managed to leave their home planet? What the commander did not see were the real defense systems. Hidden beneath the station's hull were weapons that used principles the aliens had never imagined. The humans had not just improved their technology, they had gone in completely different directions. While aliens built bigger and stronger ships, humans had learned to build ships that could not be seen or detected. The inspection continued for 3 days. The aliens visited Mars shipyards and saw humans building slow cargo vessels. They went to the outer colonies and found farming equipment and mining machines. Everywhere they looked, they found exactly what they expected. A species that had learned to survive by being useful and staying out of the way. On the last day, Dr. Yixim asked Chen about human population growth. Were there enough humans to meet the food production quotas for next year? Chen showed him charts that proved humans were barely keeping up with alien demands. The colonies were struggling. The people were working hard but could always use more help from their alien friends. Commander Veltar filed his report that night. Humans remained a Class 7 species with limited military capability. Their largest ships were unarmed cargo vessels. Their weapons technology had not improved in decades. The human population was focused on agriculture and basic manufacturing. There was no threat to Council security. As the alien inspection team left Earth, Chen watched their ship disappear into hyperspace. Then he walked to his private office and opened a secure communication channel. The message he sent was very short, but it reached over 200 hidden bases across the galaxy. It said only, "Status confirmed. Predator fleet remains undetected. Maintain current operational security. In the darkness between stars, Admiral Sarah Martinez received the message on her flagship. The ship was so black it seemed to absorb light itself. Around her, 300 other vessels waited in perfect silence. These ships had no running lights. They generated no heat signatures. They had been waiting here for 10 years, ready to move at a moment's notice. Martinez had been born on a colony world that grew wheat for alien tables. She had joined the human Space Force as a young woman, thinking she would spend her career protecting cargo ships and monitoring communications. Instead, she had been selected for a program that did not officially exist. For 20 years, she had trained for a war that everyone hoped would never come. Her ship was called the Shadow of Earth, but no alien database had any record of it. The weapons it carried could destroy a space station from 1,000 kilometers away. Its engines could accelerate faster than any alien vessel could detect. Its sensors could track enemy ships through hyperspace itself. It was everything the aliens thought humans could never build. The crew of the Shadow of Earth came from every human world. They had spent years learning to work together in complete silence. They could coordinate attacks using only hand signals and computer links. They had studied alien psychology and tactics until they could predict how any enemy would react. They were the children of farmers and miners, but they had become something else entirely. Martinez looked at the message from Ambassador Chen and allowed herself a small smile. Another successful inspection. The aliens still believed their own propaganda about human weakness. They still thought the greatest threat humans posed was producing too much grain and flooding the agricultural markets. She hoped they would continue believing it forever. Humans had chosen peace not because they were weak, but because they understood what they were capable of when they were not peaceful. The Predator fleet existed as a reminder that humanity had once been the most dangerous species on their home world. If they ever needed to remember how to hunt, the skills were still there, waiting in the darkness. But for now, the galaxy was peaceful. Humans would continue growing food and building cargo ships. The aliens would continue believing they were protecting a weak species that needed their guidance. And in the dark spaces between the stars, the Predator fleet would continue waiting for a war that everyone hoped would never come. High Commander Zexai of the Zephyrian Empire looked at the star maps and felt angry. The humans controlled some of the best farming worlds in this sector of the galaxy. Rich soil, perfect weather, and weak defenses. It was a waste to let such valuable planets remain under the control of a species that could barely protect itself. The Zephyrians had been the strongest military power in the Council for over 3 centuries. Their blue-skinned warriors were famous across the galaxy for their skill in battle. Their ships were the largest and most heavily armed in known space. When the Zephyrians wanted something, they usually got it without having to ask twice. But the humans had been causing problems lately. Their agricultural output was below target quotas 3 seasons in a row. They claimed their equipment was breaking down and they needed more time to repair it. Zexai knew the real problem. Humans were lazy and needed stronger motivation to work harder. The solution was obvious. The Zephyrian Empire would take direct control of the human agricultural worlds. They would install proper management and show the humans how real work was done. The Council had protocols for this kind of intervention. They called it protective administration when a species could not handle its responsibilities alone. Zexai had already chosen the first target, New Eden, a human colony world with the highest agricultural potential. 50 million humans lived there, growing crops and raising livestock for export across the galaxy. The planet had only basic defensive systems and a small security force. It would be easy to take control without causing too much damage to the valuable infrastructure. The attack began before dawn on New Eden. Zephyrian ships dropped out of hyperspace around the planet like falling stars. Their massive cruisers blocked all the exit routes while smaller ships headed for the surface. The human orbital defense platforms tried to respond, but their outdated weapons could not even scratch Zephyrian military shields. Captain Maria Santos was working the night shift at New Eden Control when the attack started. She had been a cargo pilot for 15 years before taking this job monitoring space traffic around the colony. It was supposed to be peaceful work, checking the schedules of grain ships and livestock transports, making sure everything arrived and left on time. When the Zephyrian fleet appeared on her sensors, Santos thought it had to be a mistake. The reading showed 47 warships, including 3 heavy cruisers with enough firepower to destroy the entire colony. There had been no warning, No diplomatic messages, no explanation. The aliens had just arrived and started targeting human installations. Santos sent emergency signals to Earth and every human ship in the system. Then she watched helplessly as Zephyrian fighters destroyed the orbital farms that fed millions of people. The aliens were not trying to capture the facilities. They were making examples. Any humans who resisted would see their homes and workplaces turned into burning wreckage. The planetary governor, James Chen, Ambassador Chen's younger brother, tried to negotiate. He contacted the Zephyrian flagship and asked what the aliens wanted. High Commander Zexhai appeared on the communication screen, his yellow eyes cold and angry. The humans had failed in their duties to the Council, he said. New Eden would now be under Zephyrian protection until the humans learned to work properly. Governor Chen asked what would happen to the human population. Zexhai's answer was simple. They would work harder than before, or they would be replaced by species that understood the value of discipline. The conversation ended when Zephyrian troops began landing in the major cities. Within 6 hours, alien soldiers controlled every important building on the planet. The news reached Earth 12 hours later. Ambassador Chen read the reports in his office and felt something cold settle in his stomach. His brother was dead, killed when he tried to protect a group of human children from Zephyrian soldiers. 47,000 other civilians had died in the first day of the occupation. The aliens called it necessary to establish proper order. Chen called for an emergency session of the Galactic Council. He stood before the assembled aliens and demanded justice for the unprovoked attack on New Eden. The Zephyrians had violated every treaty that protected Council member species. They had committed acts of war against a peaceful agricultural world. The Council must take immediate action to restore human sovereignty. The Council's response was worse than Chen had feared. The Crit High delegate spoke first, clicking his 4 hands together in a gesture that meant mild disapproval. The humans had clearly been unable to manage their agricultural responsibilities, he said. The Zephyrians were providing necessary assistance to ensure continued food production. This was an internal matter that did not require Council intervention. The delegate from the Terran Federation, humans were not allowed to represent themselves in military matters, agreed with the Crit High. Humans had been struggling to meet their obligations for several seasons. Perhaps this intervention would help them learn better work habits. The Council should be grateful that the Zephyrians were willing to take on such a difficult responsibility. When Chen tried to speak again, the Council chairman told him to be quiet. The humans should be thankful for Zephyrian protection, not complaining about it. If they worked hard and followed alien guidance, they might earn back some autonomy in a few decades. Until then, they should focus on doing their jobs and staying out of political matters they did not understand. Chen left the council chamber with his hands shaking from anger. 50 years of careful diplomacy had just been destroyed. The aliens had shown their true feelings about humans. They were useful animals that needed to be controlled, not allies who deserved respect. The peaceful facade that had protected humanity for half a century was gone. In his private office, Chen opened the secure communication channel that had remained unused for 50 years. The message he sent was brief but would change everything. Diplomatic solution failed. Council sanctions Zephyrian aggression, human colonies under alien occupation, request immediate activation of Predator Protocol, authorization code, Alpha 779. Time for the galaxy to remember what humans really are. The message traveled through quantum-encrypted channels to hidden bases across the galaxy. Within minutes, it reached Admiral Martinez on the shadow of Earth. She read it twice, then looked around the bridge at her crew. They had trained for this moment for decades, but she had hoped it would never come. Martinez stood up from her command chair and walked to the tactical display. Around her ship, 300 other human vessels waited in the darkness. Behind them, scattered across 50 hidden bases, 2,000 more ships began receiving the same message. The largest fleet in human history was about to reveal itself to a galaxy that thought humans were incapable of building anything more dangerous than a grain transport. She opened the ship-wide communication system and spoke to her crew for the first time since they had departed Earth. Her voice was calm and steady, but every human on the ship could hear the steel beneath the words. Ladies and gentlemen, the time for hiding is over. The aliens have chosen war. Now they will learn why humans were the apex predators on their homeworld. All stations report ready. Predator mode is now active. Across the galaxy, other human commanders received the same authorization. The peaceful farmers and traders that the aliens knew were about to disappear. In their place, something much older and much more dangerous was waking up. The descendants of Earth's most successful hunters were remembering how to be what they had always been, underneath the careful diplomacy and humble smiles. On New Eden, the Zephyrian occupation forces settled in for what they expected to be a long and boring assignment. Managing agricultural workers was not the kind of duty that brought glory to a warrior's career. But the pay was good, and the human colonists seemed to be accepting their new situation without too much resistance. High Commander Zexhai was already planning his next operation. There were 12 other human agricultural worlds that would benefit from direct Zephyrian management. With proper organization, the Empire could triple the food output from human space within 5 years. The humans would thank them eventually for teaching them how to work efficiently. What the Zephyrians did not know was that their fleet was already being watched. Human sensors that they could not detect were tracking every ship movement and recording every communication. In the darkness between the stars, patient hunters were studying their prey and preparing to teach the galaxy a lesson about the difference between farmers and predators. The first Zephyrian patrol ship to encounter the human fleet was the Glory of Conquest, a heavy cruiser with enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Captain Rexhan had been patrolling the outer edges of New Eden's system for 3 days, looking for any human ships that might try to interfere with the occupation. His sensors showed empty space in all directions. Then something impossible happened. The Glory of Conquest simply vanished from all communication networks. One moment the ship was sending routine patrol reports, and the next moment there was only silence. The Zephyrian command center tried to contact the vessel for 6 hours before admitting that something was wrong. High Commander Zexhai ordered a search of the entire system. 3 more cruisers and a dozen smaller ships spread out to find the missing patrol. They expected to discover wreckage from a reactor accident or maybe evidence that the crew had mutinied and stolen the ship. What they found instead was absolutely nothing. No debris, no energy signatures, no trace that the Glory of Conquest had ever existed. The truth was that Captain Rexhan and his crew were still alive, but they were no longer in control of their ship. The Glory of Conquest now drifted in a hidden human base, its crew imprisoned and its systems completely compromised. The humans had not destroyed the vessel. They had captured it without firing a single shot. Admiral Martinez stood on the bridge of the Shadow of Earth and watched her crew work. They had been practicing this kind of operation for years, but tonight was the first time they had used their skills against a real enemy. The capture had been perfect. Her ships had surrounded the Zephyrian cruiser, disabled its engines and communications, and beamed the crew into holding cells before the aliens even realized they were under attack. The human ships were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. While alien vessels were big and heavily armored, human ships were built for stealth and speed. Their hulls absorbed sensor waves instead of reflecting them. Their engines produced no heat signatures that enemy systems could detect. They could appear next to an enemy ship, disable it, and disappear again before anyone knew what had happened. Commander Sarah Kim led the boarding team that had taken control of the Glory of Conquest. She had been born on a mining colony and trained as an engineer before joining the secret human military program. Like every member of the Predator fleet, she had spent years learning to think like a hunter rather than a defender. The Zephyrian ship's computer systems had been completely compromised within minutes. Human cyber warfare technology was decades ahead of anything the aliens used, because humans had developed it in secret while pretending to be simple farmers. Kim's team now had access to every Zephyrian communication channel, every fleet movement plan, and every classified military database. What they learned from the captured data was disturbing but not surprising. The Zephyrians were planning to occupy 7 more human worlds within the next month. They had lists of human leaders to be arrested and quotas for how many colonists could be eliminated if they caused trouble. The aliens had never intended this to be a temporary intervention. They were planning permanent conquest. Admiral Martinez read the reports and felt her anger turn cold and focused. The Zephyrians had made a serious mistake when they decided humans were too weak to fight back. Now they would learn what happened when farmers stopped pretending to be harmless and remembered that their ancestors had once hunted much more dangerous prey than alien soldiers. The human strategy was simple but devastating. Instead of fighting the kind of direct battles that aliens expected, humans would hunt the Zephyrian fleet like wolves hunting elk. They would strike at supply convoys, communication stations, and isolated patrols. They would make the aliens afraid to travel alone and paranoid about every shadow in space. The second attack came 3 days later. A Zephyrian supply convoy carrying food and ammunition to New Eden was crossing an empty region of space when human ships appeared from nowhere. The convoy's escorts tried to respond, but their weapons could not lock onto targets that moved faster than their computers could track. Within minutes, 5 cargo ships and 2 destroyers had been captured or destroyed. The human ships struck like lightning and disappeared just as quickly. By the time Zephyrian reinforcements arrived, there was nothing left but empty space and a few pieces of debris. The convoy's cargo had vanished along with the attackers. The aliens began to realize they were not dealing with desperate farmers making suicide attacks. They were facing an organized military force with technology they could not understand. Captain Lisa Rodriguez commanded one of the human hunter-killer squadrons. Her ship, the Silent Fury, was smaller than most alien fighters but packed weapons that could destroy vessels 10 times its size. She had been a cargo pilot before joining the Predator fleet, running grain shipments between human colonies. Now she used her knowledge of shipping routes to hunt the very aliens who had once been her customers. Rodriguez's squadron specialized in what humans called ghost attacks. They would track enemy ships for days, learning their patrol patterns and communication schedules. Then they would strike at the moment when the target was most vulnerable, during shift changes, equipment maintenance, or crew rest periods. The aliens never saw them coming and rarely lived long enough to send distress signals. The Zephyrian response was predictable, but useless. They increased their patrol schedules and started traveling in larger groups. They installed new sensor equipment and changed their communication codes every few hours. But every defensive measure they tried had already been anticipated by human tactical computers that had been studying alien behavior for decades. Within 2 weeks, the Zephyrian occupation force on New Eden was completely cut off from the rest of their empire. Human raiders had destroyed every supply convoy and communication relay in the system. The aliens still controlled the planet's surface, but they were trapped there with dwindling supplies and no way to call for help. High Commander HFY sat in his command center and tried to understand what was happening. The humans were supposed to be weak. Their technology was supposed to be primitive. Their military was supposed to consist of a few patrol boats and some outdated defense platforms. How had they built a fleet capable of making Zephyrian warships disappear without a trace? The answer came when his intelligence officers finally managed to decode some of the human communications they had intercepted. The ships attacking them were not hastily converted civilian vessels operated by desperate farmers. They were purpose-built warships crewed by professional soldiers who had been training for this kind of warfare for decades. The humans had been lying to the galaxy for 50 years. While they pretended to be peaceful agricultural workers, they had actually been building the most advanced military force in known space. Every humble request for protection had been part of a deception designed to make their enemies underestimate them. Every diplomatic concession had bought them more time to prepare for war. HFY tried to contact the Galactic Council and request immediate military assistance. But his communications were being jammed by human electronic warfare systems that could penetrate any encryption the aliens used. Every message he sent was intercepted and either blocked or altered before it could reach its destination. The humans were not just attacking Zephyrian ships, they were controlling the flow of information across the entire region. On the other side of the galaxy, other human squadrons were beginning similar operations against Zephyrian installations. The aliens had military bases and supply depots scattered across hundreds of star systems, all of them now under silent attack by forces they could not see or fight. The largest empire in the galaxy was discovering that size and strength meant nothing against an enemy that refused to fight fair, Admiral. Martinez watched the tactical displays on her bridge and allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The first phase of the operation was proceeding exactly as planned. The Zephyrians were beginning to understand that they had not conquered a colony of helpless farmers. They had awakened something that had been sleeping in the darkness for half a century, waiting for someone to be foolish enough to threaten human civilians. The time for hiding was over. Across the galaxy, Human crews were powering up weapon systems that had never been tested in combat, but had been designed by the descendants of the most successful predators in Earth's history. The aliens were about to learn why humans had once been the apex species on a planet full of dangerous creatures, and why they had chosen peace not from weakness, but from the knowledge of what they could do when they chose war instead. General Vexmore, supreme commander of all Zephyrian military forces, stared at the reports coming in from across the Empire and felt something he had never experienced before: fear. In the past month, the humans had destroyed or captured over 200 Zephyrian ships without losing a single vessel of their own. Entire patrol fleets had simply vanished, leaving no trace of what had happened to them. The humans were not fighting like any species the Zephyrians had ever encountered. They did not mass their fleets for great battles or try to capture strategic positions. Instead, they hunted individual ships in small groups, striking without warning and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. It was like fighting ghosts that could destroy entire cruisers and then fade back into empty space. The Zephyrian military had been designed to fight other military forces in open battle. Their ships were heavily armored and carried massive weapons meant to destroy enemy fleets in direct combat. But those same ships were too slow to catch human raiders and too big to hide from human sensors. The aliens were discovering that all their advantages meant nothing against an enemy that refused to fight the way wars were supposed to be fought. Captain Elena Vasquez commanded the human destroyer Nightshade and had become something of a legend among both human and alien forces. In 3 weeks of operations, her ship had sunk 12 Zephyrian vessels and captured 4 more without taking a single hit in return. The aliens had started calling her ship the Death Shadow because it seemed to appear from nowhere, destroy its targets, and vanish again like a bad dream. Vasquez had been a mining engineer before joining the Predator fleet. She understood how to move through asteroid fields and gas clouds without being detected. Her crew had learned to use the natural features of space as cover, hiding their ship in places where alien sensors could not find them. They would wait for days or weeks until the perfect target came within range, then strike with devastating precision. The human tactics were based on lessons their species had learned millions of years ago when they were still hunting animals on Earth. Humans had never been the strongest or fastest predators on their home world, but they had been the smartest and most patient. They would track their prey for days, learning its habits and weaknesses, then strike at the moment when it was most vulnerable. Now those same instincts were being used against alien spaceships. Human commanders would study enemy patrol routes for weeks, mapping every detail of their movements and schedules. They would identify the moments when ships were isolated from support or when crews were tired and less alert. Then they would coordinate attacks with surgical precision, often destroying their targets before the aliens even realized they were in danger. The psychological effect on Zephyrian forces was devastating. Alien crews began to dread patrol assignments and started seeing human ships in every sensor shadow. Officers who had once been confident and aggressive became nervous and hesitant, afraid to take any action that might expose them to human attack. The mighty Zephyrian war machine was being paralyzed by fear of an enemy they could not see or predict. High Commander Zexhai tried to restore morale by planning a massive retaliation against human civilian targets. If the humans wanted to fight dirty, he would show them what real brutality looked like. He ordered his remaining fleet to attack the agricultural world of New Harmony, home to 20 million human farmers and their families. The destruction of an entire planet would teach the humans the price of defying Zephyrian authority. The Zephyrian fleet that headed for New Harmony was the largest military force the Empire had assembled in over a century. 47 heavy cruisers, 96 destroyers, and over 300 support vessels. Enough firepower to reduce a planet to radioactive dust within hours. General Vexmore was confident that no force in the galaxy could stand against such overwhelming might. What the Zephyrians discovered when they arrived at New Harmony changed everything they thought they knew about human capabilities. The planet was protected by defensive systems that made their military installations look primitive. Automated weapon platforms emerged from what had appeared to be empty space, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a cruiser. The agricultural world was revealed to be one of the most heavily fortified positions in the galaxy, but the real shock came when the human defense fleet arrived. Over 500 human warships dropped out of hyperspace around the Zephyrian formation, ships that according to every alien intelligence report should not have existed. These were not converted cargo vessels or hastily armed civilian craft. They were purpose-built instruments of war, sleek and deadly, moving with a coordination that spoke of years of training and preparation. Admiral Martinez led the human fleet from the bridge of the shadow of Earth. She looked at the massive Zephyrian formation and felt a cold satisfaction. The aliens had finally come out of hiding and given her the chance for a direct confrontation. For weeks, her ships had been hunting scattered patrols and supply convoys. Now she could show the galaxy what humans were really capable of when they stopped pretending to be peaceful farmers. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. The Zephyrians fought with the traditional tactics that had made them the dominant military power for centuries. Massive ships in tight formations, overwhelming firepower directed at the largest enemy targets, and disciplined maneuvers designed to maximize their numerical advantage. The humans fought like a pack of wolves attacking a herd of buffalo. Their ships split into small groups that attacked from multiple directions simultaneously. They used their superior speed and stealth to appear where the aliens least expected, them strike hard and disappear before the enemy could respond. Individual human ships were smaller and less heavily armed than Zephyrian cruisers, but they worked together with a coordination that made them far more effective than their numbers suggested. Captain Rodriguez found herself in command of a squadron attacking the Zephyrian flagship. Her 6 ships moved through the alien formation like hunting fish, each one targeting a different system on the massive enemy vessel. While the Zephyrians tried to bring their main guns to bear on targets that moved too fast to track, the humans systematically destroyed the cruiser's engines, weapons, and life support systems. Within 2 hours, the largest military fleet in Zephyrian history had been completely destroyed or captured. Not a single human ship had been lost, while alien casualties numbered in the hundreds of thousands. The survivors who managed to escape in life pods carried stories that would haunt the Zephyrian Empire for generations. Tales of human ships that moved like living creatures and fought with an intelligence that seemed to anticipate every alien move. News of the battle spread across the galaxy within days. The species that had once dismissed humans as harmless agricultural workers now watched in stunned silence as reports came in of Zephyrian fleets being hunted to extinction. Every alien government began emergency reviews of their intelligence about human capabilities, wondering what other surprises the seemingly peaceful species had been hiding. The Galactic Council called an emergency session to address what they were now calling the human crisis. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss how to respond to the revelation that one of their member species had been deceiving them for half a century. The humans had not just hidden their military capabilities, they had built a war machine that could apparently defeat any force in known space. But before the Council could decide on any course of action, they received a message from Admiral Martinez that changed everything. The human fleet was not interested in conquest or expansion. They had activated their military only to protect human civilians from Zephyrian aggression. If the Zephyrians withdrew from all human territory and paid reparations for the damage they had caused, the humans would return to their peaceful ways and forget that this conflict had ever happened. The offer was generous, but it came with an unspoken threat that every alien leader understood perfectly. The humans had demonstrated that they could destroy any fleet and capture any target they chose to attack. They were offering peace, but they were also making it clear that war would end very badly for anyone who chose to continue fighting them. General Vexmore sat in his command center and read the casualty reports from New Harmony. The pride of the Zephyrian military had been completely annihilated in less than 3 hours. The humans had not just defeated his forces, they had made them look like amateurs. Everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about warfare had been proven obsolete by a species they had dismissed as too weak to be worth their attention. The choice facing the Zephyrian Empire was simple, but humiliating. They could accept the human terms and withdraw from all occupied territories, admitting defeat to a species they had considered inferior, or they could continue fighting and face the complete destruction of their civilization, by an enemy that seemed capable of hunting down and destroying every ship they could build. The decision took less than an hour. The Zephyrian High Council voted unanimously to accept human terms and end the conflict immediately. The mighty empire that had dominated this region of the galaxy for centuries was surrendering to farmers and agricultural workers who had somehow become the most dangerous military force. Ambassador Chen walked into the Galactic Council chamber. For the first time since the war began, and everything was different. The same alien delegates sat in the same seats, but now they watched him with careful respect instead of casual dismissal. The Zephyrian representative avoided his eyes entirely. The Crit High delegate's 4 hands were folded in a gesture that meant deep consideration. Everyone understood that the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted permanently. Chen took his place at the human delegation's table, a table that had been moved from the back of the chamber to a position of honor near the council chairman's podium. For 50 years, humans had been seated with the minor species and agricultural worlds. Now they sat with the major powers, and everyone knew why. The species that could destroy the Zephyrian Empire in a matter of weeks could no longer be treated as a junior member of the galactic community. The council chairman, an elderly Volax with silver skin and wise old eyes, called the session to order. The agenda was simple but unprecedented: how to integrate a species that had just revealed itself to be the most dangerous military force in known space. The humans had honored their promise to return to peaceful behavior after the Zephyrians surrendered, but everyone knew that the threat of human military action would influence every political decision for generations to come. Chairman Velzar spoke first, his voice careful and measured. The council needed to understand how the humans had managed to deceive galactic intelligence services for half a century. More importantly, they needed to know what other capabilities humans might be hiding. The revelation of the Predator fleet had shattered every assumption about human technological development and military potential. Chen stood up to address the assembly, and the chamber fell completely silent. When he spoke, his voice carried none of the humble gratitude that had characterized human diplomacy for decades. Instead, he sounded like the representative of a major power addressing equals and potential rivals. The farmers and agricultural workers that the galaxy had known were gone, replaced by something much more complex and dangerous. Humans had never intended to deceive anyone, Chen explained. When they first joined the galactic community, they had genuinely been a peaceful species focused on agriculture and trade. But they had also been students of history, and history had taught them that peaceful species often became extinct species when more aggressive neighbors decided they wanted something their peaceful neighbors possessed. So humans had made a choice that reflected their nature as both farmers and predators. They would grow food and trade peacefully with anyone who wanted to be peaceful in return. But they would also remember what their ancestors had been before they learned to plant crops and domesticate animals. If anyone ever threatened human civilians, they would discover that farmers could become hunters again very quickly. The Predator fleet, Chen revealed, was only part of human defensive preparations. Every agricultural world had hidden weapon systems that could hold off invasion fleets until military support arrived. Every cargo ship that carried grain and livestock also carried sensors that monitored alien fleet movements. Every human diplomat and trader was also an intelligence operative, gathering information about potential threats to human security. But humans had no interest in conquest or expansion, Chen assured the council. They wanted to continue growing food and trading with their galactic neighbors. They wanted to be left alone to pursue their own development in peace. The Predator fleet would return to its hidden bases and remain there as long as no one threatened human civilians again. The galaxy could continue as it had before, with one important difference. Now everyone would know that humans were not helpless prey animals waiting to be devoured by stronger predators. The Crit High delegate was the first to respond. His 4 hands moved in complex patterns as he spoke, a sign of deep respect in his culture. The humans had demonstrated wisdom in their preparation and restraint in their victory. Perhaps the galaxy had underestimated not just human military capabilities, but human intelligence and strategic thinking as well. The Crit High would be honored to continue trading with such formidable partners. Other delegates quickly followed with similar statements. The Terran Federation offered expanded trade agreements. The Mining Guild proposed joint exploration ventures in the outer systems, species that had barely acknowledged human existence. a month ago were now eager to establish stronger diplomatic and economic relationships with the revealed military superpower. The Zephyrian representative finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. The Empire formally apologized for its actions against human civilians and accepted full responsibility for starting the conflict. They would pay reparations as agreed and withdraw all military forces from human space immediately. The proud warriors who had once considered humans to be useful animals were now asking for forgiveness and promising never to interfere with human affairs again. Far from Earth, Admiral Martinez stood on the bridge of the Shadow of Earth and watched her fleet prepare to return to its hidden bases. The mission had been a complete success. Human civilians were safe, the Zephyrians had been defeated, and the galaxy now understood that humanity was not as helpless as it appeared. But she also knew that this victory had come at a price. The age of human innocence was over. For 50 years, humans had been able to move through the galaxy as peaceful farmers and traders, welcomed everywhere because they posed no threat to anyone. Now every alien species would look at humans and see potential enemies rather than harmless neighbors. The price of security was eternal vigilance, and the price of revealing their true capabilities was the loss of the comfortable anonymity they had enjoyed for decades. But Martinez also felt a deep satisfaction as she looked at her crew. These men and women had spent their entire careers preparing for a war they hoped would never come. When it finally arrived, they had performed flawlessly, protecting human lives and demonstrating that their species would never again be victims of alien aggression. The children of farmers and miners had become the galaxy's most effective military force, and they had used that power responsibly. Captain Rodriguez brought her ship alongside the flagship for the return journey to dark space. She had been born on a colony world that grew vegetables for alien tables, and she would probably die on a colony world that grew vegetables for alien tables. But now she knew that her children would grow up in a galaxy where humans were respected and feared in equal measure, where no alien empire would ever again make the mistake of thinking that peaceful farmers were easy prey. The human fleet began its withdrawal to the hidden bases where it would wait for the next crisis. But everyone in the galaxy knew that the crisis might never come. The revelation that humans possessed overwhelming military superiority had changed the balance of power so dramatically that traditional warfare might become obsolete. No species would risk the kind of devastating defeat that the Zephyrians had suffered, especially not against an enemy that had demonstrated such tactical brilliance and strategic patience. On New Eden, the human colonists began the work of rebuilding their world. The Zephyrian occupation forces had withdrawn within days of their empire's surrender, leaving behind infrastructure that was actually more advanced than what the humans had possessed before the invasion. The aliens had intended to improve agricultural productivity for their own benefit, but the colonists would now use those improvements to feed their own growing population. Governor Sarah, Chen, she had taken her brother's position after his death, stood in the reconstructed capital city and watched human families return to their homes. The occupation had lasted only a few weeks, but it had changed everyone who lived through it. These farmers and factory workers now knew that their peaceful way of life was protected by the most powerful military force in the galaxy, a force made up of people just like themselves who had chosen to be guardians rather than conquerors. The war crimes trials began 6 months later. The Galactic Council established special courts to prosecute Zephyrian officers who had committed atrocities against human civilians. The trials were conducted according to galactic law, but everyone understood that they were only possible because humans now had the military power to demand justice. The same council that had refused to protect human colonies was now eager to demonstrate its commitment to human rights. In the years that followed, the galaxy settled into a new equilibrium. Humans continued to grow food and trade with their neighbors, but now they did so as equals rather than junior partners. The trade agreements were more favorable to human interests, and the shipping routes were patrolled by mixed fleets that included human vessels. The farmers who had once been overlooked in galactic politics became major players in every important negotiation. But the most important change was psychological. The galaxy had learned that appearances could be deceiving, that peaceful species might possess hidden depths of strength and determination. The assumption that military power belonged only to obviously aggressive species had been shattered forever. Now every